Thanks for coming. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for being here. What I'm going to do is talk about what lies ahead for the millions of Ukrainian refugees. As the crisis stretches in time and space, we should witness movements of onward migration, even beyond Europe, as well as new refugee flows. So a couple of notes here before I start. We're witnessing new developments every day, which obviously I cannot cover. But if anything, these reinforce the hypothesis I present to you today, which is that the future likely scenario is one towards new refugee flows and onward migration in and outside Europe instead of large-scale returns. This presentation is derived from a report I wrote on Ukrainian refugees 6 months into the crisis. Well, now it's beyond 6 months. You can find it on our website when it's up, hopefully next week. And I also list here a number of the various organizations and think tanks I base my report on, just for you to have an idea. So let's start with the numbers. These are UNHCR numbers for the first 6 months of the conflict. 7 million Ukrainians, mostly women and children, because as we know, men aged 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave Ukraine, sought refuge across Europe since the recent Russian invasion. 4 million registered for the EU temporary protection. So why this discrepancy? Because 2.5 million went to non-EU countries which do not have temporary protection. And only 25,000 applied for asylum in the EU. Most refugees flee to neighboring countries, but this initial movement can be followed by onward migration, depending on welcoming policies and protection, but also on diaspora and economic opportunities. There is no legal ground for distribution of Ukrainian refugees among EU member states. Onward migration here follows personal initiatives. So Ukrainian refugees choose the country they want to settle in and apply for temporary protection. For example, of the 5.6 million who fled to Poland, only 1.3 applied for TP there. One word about this temporary protection. It looks like it's not going to be that temporary. Actually, it was just announced that it will be extended through 2024. Also, those who decide to return to Ukraine can keep their protection, a measure, I believe, aimed at inciting returns. Permanent return is not on the agenda for the majority of Ukrainian refugees for a number of reasons. Many come from provinces that are now controlled by Russia. There's the persistence of hostilities that undermine reconstruction attempts. Also, research saw that women and children have a relatively low probability of returning, especially the longer the war lasts and the children are rooted in schools. UNHCR calculated border crossings in and out of Ukraine from February to August. You can see the numbers. Movements back to Ukraine do not necessarily indicate sustainable returns, as the situation across Ukraine remains highly volatile. So most return of refugees are not permanent, but what we call pendular, meaning these are back and forth movement to visit family, get supplies, or help other relatives evacuate. According to IOM, only 10% of refugees returned home with the intention of staying. Even then, returns may not be long-term. So will we see future flows? As the conflict stretches in time and space, more Ukrainians obviously will want to flee their country. Plus, men could decide to join their spouses when restrictions on their group is lifted, or even in defiance of an ongoing mobilization, which means that part of the family union can be taking place out of Ukraine and not in the other direction. So the idea that all Ukrainians want to return home is not supported by data on migration intentions. According to the World Gallup poll, even prior to the February 24 invasion, 25% of the adult population in Ukraine wished to migrate for various reasons, including corruption, ongoing violence, lower living standards, and inviting diaspora. So 25% of those wanting to leave corresponds to about 12 million people. That is an important number. So now that this pre-existing desire to leave has forcibly become a reality for millions of Ukrainians, many will want to hang on to this reality and not go back even if the conflict ends. Which means that the refugee flow created by this conflict could turn into a permanent one for millions who wanted out anyway. The preferred destinations of Ukrainians before this recent conflict gives us an idea of the distribution of Ukrainian refugees today. Of those who wanted to leave Ukraine before, around half wanted to move to EU countries, like Poland, Germany, Italy, etc. Outside the EU, 15% wanted to move to the US, 13% to Russia, and 6% to Canada. We can see how the distribution of Ukrainian refugees now fits the narrative of countries listed as favorite destinations prior to the crisis. Russia, Poland, Germany, for example, host today millions of Ukrainian refugees. You can see the numbers posted. Now, outside of Europe, Canada is giving temporary resident visas to Ukrainians. From March to October, you had 6,000 applications, 300,000 were approved. As for US, we'll talk about it in a bit. Now, increasing numbers of Ukrainians refugees might be moving out of Europe. Europe's economy obviously is further challenged by millions of Ukrainian refugees and soaring energy prices. Its integration capacity, including job markets, education, housing, etc., is close to reaching its limits. With time, Ukrainians could find non-European countries, including the US, more and more attractive. So let's move to the admissions of Ukrainians in the US. Since the beginning of the crisis, we had some 100,000 Ukrainians were admitted under a program called Uniting for Ukraine. Those are admitted as parolees. Around 900 were admitted under a refugee resettlement program. Those are admitted as refugees. So what's the difference between the two? In a few words, the process to resettle refugees here takes time, over a year. The resettlement program offers a durable solution for refugees. They have to apply for a green card 1 year after admission. They are provided with multiple federal benefits upon arrival and beyond to help them integrate. Parole, on the other hand, is quick. It's just an official permission to enter and remain temporarily in the US. Parolees have limited access to federal benefits. But a bill was passed by Congress in May to give Ukrainian parolees the same federal assistance as resettled refugees. So these numbers I just listed, these newcomers, add to the existing immigrant community of 350,000 Ukrainians who are already here. I want to talk about Uniting for Ukraine just a little bit more. It is presented as a private sponsorship program, and it's a fast-track admissions pathway which was designed by Biden to admit Ukrainians straight from Europe. So how does it work? You have a US-based sponsor who, by the way, does not need to be a US citizen or even a green card holder. They can be parolees, they can be asylees, or even beneficiary of deferred enforced departure, what we call DEDs. So this sponsor, US-based, agrees to provide a Ukrainian beneficiary with financial support during his stay here. But other people or even organizations like resettlement agencies that are mostly funded by the government can also offer financial support to facilitate admissions. Ukrainian parolees who now have access to federal benefits can in turn sponsor other Ukrainians here. And once again, in case these funds are not sufficient, organizations can intervene to get the process going. In conclusion, what we could end up with is a taxpayer-funded cycle instead of a private one. So what next? Should we expect more Ukrainians joining their compatriots in the US? 100,000 were admitted in just a few months. Could we expect 200, 300,000 next year? Will we witness family reunions in the US with men joining in? We saw before this conflict millions of Ukrainians wished to leave their country to live elsewhere. It would make sense if many of these family reunions were to take place on American soil. Final thoughts. We're witnessing new developments with Russian men fleeing their country to avoid the military service. Many countries in Europe were quick to close their borders. 2 Russians even made it to Alaska.
By boat.
Landed. So our Russian flows, men, not women, towards the US likely, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think the Biden administration is ready for a Uniting for Russia program just yet. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions and comments.